classical chess, but he was much quicker than he usually is. So I think it's something he's been working on for sure.
Interesting. Vladislav, Artemiev, they are ready. The games should be starting any second now. We do see a few games in the bottom of the screen have already started. We're going to pay attention to all of the games going on, you guys, and update you, of course, on results. And we're going to jump into as many games as we can, but we will always follow one game at a time. So now we're going to follow this game until it's finished. And if we have time, we're going to jump into another game, or we're going to wait until the next round. What do you think? Is this going to be a long game? And here we go. It's finally starting.
Yeah, my prediction was wrong.
Yeah, a very rare first move from Magnus Carlsen. He's pushed his G-pawn forward just one square, getting ready
It's not even the B-pawn.
It's not even the B-pawn, which we saw a lot last season, popularised by Adiban, of course, the Indian Grandmaster. Magnus, he's pushed a pawn, but it's the same idea, just on the other side of the board. The white light-squared bishop is just going to slide across one square to a long diagonal. But this has got to be unexpected for Artemiev. Artemiev actually is a king of rare openings himself, but Magnus rarely employs something like this.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I've seen Artemiev play this type of opening with the white pieces himself, so...
Using his own poison against him, maybe Magnus Carlsen. He teased us there, waiting, just letting us kind of hang on the first move, and it's a big surprise already. I'm wondering whether Artemiev knows the game has started or whether he's just in such big shock of Magnus's first move. OK, Artemiev does reply, brings his knight out. Very standard, very natural stuff. He's keeping his central pawns flexible. And I expect to see Magnus now develop that white light-squared bishop. And there we go. It sits on the G2 square, where it has great range along a very potent diagonal.
Yeah, and now I'm curious to see what kind of strategy Artemiev will adapt, because here's just answer it. He's put his pawn on light squares. So, well, I expect all the pawns to go on light squares from now on from Artemiev.
Yeah, and there we go. One thing that we expected to see throughout the tour was Magnus eating noodles. He's at it again, already in the first game of the Champions Chess Tour.
Yeah.
It served him well last year. Well, mostly well.
Yeah, it was a little bit up and down, actually. Yeah.
The noodle gambit. And now we see both players revert to more standard, more normal types of development. White has got the king castled, now challenging the black central pawn before black's king is safe. And it's a temporary gambit. Black can take that pawn, but the black pawn would not last very long. Maybe black wants to maintain more influence in the centre by just backing up his central pawn with another pawn.
Critical moment here, actually, because Artemiev has a range of options. He can actually support that pawn in the middle of the board by pushing up his c-pawn one square forward, just reinforcing that light square strategy. He can also just castle and just say, hey, I'm going to give you the centre, but what I'm going to do is once you occupy the centre, I'm going to attack it with pieces. He can even, this is a really risky choice, push that pawn one square forward, and that would be the maximalist approach.
The black central pawn.
Yes.
Gaining as much space as possible. He actually captures. We see a pawn trade. I was about to say I had a serious case of déjà vu, because just last week I played a friendly game against Magnus, and it was in the exact position as black. I brought my knight out, but here Artemiev just chooses to release the tension by exchanging a set of pawns. And I mentioned black has gone a pawn up, but it's not going to last long. White's knight now sitting on the edge of the board, not on a great square, but next move, Magnus is going to re-centralise that knight and recapture the black pawn, restoring material balance. It's a bit cagey so far. It's still very tense, very early days, but it shows Magnus wants to keep as many pieces on the board as possible. Pawn trades are fine, but piece play will be the battleground later on.
Yeah, there's one big danger here for black in this type of position, and that's if you allow white to simply recapture the pawn with a knight and then establish a stronghold in the centre. It could be a case of whose light square bishop is better. You know, white's light square bishop is on the perfect long diagonal. If the black doesn't find a role for his own bishop, well, then white is just comfortably better. Yeah. And it's just going to be very pleasant days, happy days for white.
Yeah. It doesn't sound like much, but also once that black pawn disappears, white will have two central pawns on the two central files. Black only has one. So white has kind of exchanged off a flank pawn. It's not quite a flank pawn, but a pawn at the side of the board for a central pawn. And that's a tiny little gain. It's at least a moral victory for Magnus. And actually, he employed similar setups in the World Championship match against Jan Nepomniachtchi. So, yeah, Magnus, not his usual strategy maybe, but showing that over the last year or so, he has evolved his game. And it doesn't look like Artemiev's too comfortable. If you see on the camera, already his head in his hands, already spending a couple of minutes, and it's only move 6.
How rare is this opening choice by Magnus?
From him, it's rare.
Yeah.
I've seen, as Jovanka mentioned, I've seen Artemiev employ this type of thing from the white side quite regularly. I employ it from the white side very often, but it's not normally Magnus's style. He's more classical. He likes to occupy the center with pawns, slowly maneuver, bring his pieces out. And this one, it's definitely going to heat up later. But Artemiev, I'm getting worried already. We talked about the clock situation, and he's still got 12 and a bit minutes left, but things are going to heat up. He needs that time for later.
Exactly, and he's taking the time to consider what type of position he should be going for. So now he castles the king. That's a very natural move. And after knight takes pawn, it's here where he has to make that decision. And he's done it. He's actually pushed his pawn forward. C-pawn 2 squares, that's actually not the main line. The main line was actually developing the knight on the left side.
Yeah, so will this move cause Magnus to think? He just still tucking away into his noodles. Jovanka, you're right. This one, for me, is a bit odd as well. Black trying to get some influence over the centre, so it looks logical, this pawn push. But then again, if you look at the black pieces on that left side, they're undeveloped, they're not ready for the centre to open up. So I wouldn't be surprised if Magnus pushes his central pawn forward, the white d-pawn, 2 squares, tries to explode open the position before black is ready. So, maybe surprised by a slightly rare move. Magnus will spend a couple of minutes. I'm getting a bit jealous of that food now, but Magnus, after just kind of getting his bearings, he will probably push a pawn forward in the centre.
Yeah. One square, 2 squares.
I think 2. What do you think, Jovanka?
1 square.
I'm not... OK, he doesn't push the central pawn. He pushes the b pawn. So something that you mentioned, Kaya, the b3 opening, just slightly delayed. He saved it for move 8.
Well, he's keeping on the flanks today, the world champion so far.
Yeah, and he's consistent. He's trying to play a bit of symmetry with his bishops. Both bishops going out to their longest possible diagonals. They're going to try and create that crisscross effect later on. Yeah. Black just bringing a knight out there, and Magnus will for sure bring out his dark squared bishop.
There aren't too many games in the database, actually, but there is one notable game between Ding Liren and Samuel Shanklin. That was a really quick game that was played with maybe 3 minutes on the clock. So you shouldn't really take this game so seriously. But, there, white actually won.
OK.
That's important to know. We love our stats here, right? So the fact that white has a good score, or at least among top-level players from this position, means it might be quite promising. Also, we should mention, it's a new season, but we still have the evaluation bar just above the players' cameras. And right now, the evaluation bar says white has a 0.9 advantage. So if it goes over to the left, it means white's doing well. If it goes over to the right, black is doing better. So we'll keep an eye on that. We won't trust it yet. It's still early days. But I do quite like white's position. I love the 2 white bishops, very flexibly placed. And the computer seems to approve of what Magnus is doing as well.
And just through kind of some unusual move orders, we're now transposed into something where more games have been played. And here, nearly every single game has kind of gone. The moment is now push the queen's pawn 2 squares open and explode open the position. Wow. So things are going to heat up now.
OK, so now is the moment, Jovanka. And just to show this idea, white can already, as you mentioned, push this pawn forward, exploding things open. This would lead to potentially a lot of trades, maybe even an endgame. So that might cause Magnus to hesitate against an endgame maestro like Artemiev. But after white pushes in the centre, black will recapture. We'll see another trade. The knights will come off the board. Maybe even the queens will come off here. And this position, it looks pretty balanced. But then again, we've talked about the bishops a lot, and this bishop is fantastic. This bishop as well, hitting one of the black pawns, and these 2 black pawns are just very loose, very vulnerable, and it looks roughly balanced apart from the bishops and the quality of those pieces, and that would be why white has a small advantage. I wouldn't be surprised to see Magnus play this in the current position, pushing this pawn forward, trying to trade pieces, but if he wants a quieter, longer manoeuvring game, then maybe we'll see him just push this pawn 1 square, just kind of inch forward, keep all the pieces on the board. It's a matter of taste. Let's see what type of mood the world champion's in.
He is definitely thinking now, Magnus Carlsen, and you did mention, David, this is a season that's going to be very much influenced by stats. We're going to talk about stats a lot. And we do have that tour rating. Magnus starting at what is it?
2860, I think.
Is it? Yeah.
2860 something.
Yeah, 2865.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty gigantic rating.
Yeah.
Stratospheric.
But we know he's going for 2,900 in classical chess. Is the odds higher that he's going to reach that faster in the online tour rating?
Quite possibly. So meanwhile, Magnus just pushed his pawn for 1 square, which means he wants maximum tension. Actually, this season on the tour, we are using a multiplication factor of 20, and in classical chess, over the board chess, the multiplication factor is only 10.
Okay.
So that means players can actually double the amount that they would gain compared to classical chess if they perform well, but they would also double the amount they lose.
Yeah.
If they're not doing so well. So we'll see big fluctuations in rating. Magnus, he loves his numbers. He loves his stats. I think maybe more than anyone in the chess world. And if he gets 2,900, I'm sure, in the tour, I'm sure we'll see him brag about it. It's definitely going to be on his mind.
Could we even, at some point, maybe next year, start talking about 3,000?
That is like the magical
Yeah,
number.
isn't it?
No one's ever gotten close to that. People have done performances over 3,000, but
It's rare.
it's no one's come close.
Yeah, not in classical over-the-board chess,
No.
at least. One thing I should mention, though, is Magnus plays a lot online. He plays a lot of blitz in his free time. For example, on Chess24, his rating there is over 3,000. And there it's slightly inflated because there's so many players playing all the time. It's easy to get games, but it's not impossible. If he goes on a streak like he did last season in the tour, 2,900 might just be the first step.
Wow. Oh, it's going to be fun to follow. We did have a few moves in the game.
Yeah, so just very solid moves. We didn't go for your idea, Ivanka, and the move you said had been played several times before, exploding open the centre. Magnus just taking a slower approach. Now he's just pushed a pawn forward 1 square, pushed his queen forward 1 square, and connected the 2 white rooks. Rooks usually are happier when they're connected. It just means they have more access to whichever files, whichever lines open up later. So, yeah, just very logical play from both sides, not committing anything yet. And I think Magnus, for sure, he's got a strategy in mind. He's going to try and play it against Artemiev's clock a bit later on.
What is he doing?
Okay, meanwhile, Magnus just swiveling on that chair. Oh, I've got a temptation to do the same now. But we see the Secret Lab chair as well. I think all of the players are going to be using that throughout the tour.
It's a very comfortable chair.
Yeah, super comfortable. Perfect for gaming, perfect for esports and online chess. So, yeah, Magnus just distracted there for a second. I don't think there was anything suspicious going on there. I think he was just getting a bottle of water or something. And, yeah, Artemiev needs to speed up. He's a couple of minutes behind on the clock, but it's still early days. There's a lot of action left in this game later. And that's the one criticism I've had of him and that we've all had of him later in the game. He's on the last few seconds and it gives us nervy moments and gives him nervy moments too. And meanwhile, one thing I should mention as well, we talked about the evaluation bars. Look at that game between Esipenko and Mamedyarov. I think within 2 or 3 minutes of that game starting, the bar was all away to Esipenko's side. Could be a great start from the youngster.
Yeah, and OK, so Artemiev has actually moved his queen forward, connecting the 2 rooks together. It means the 2 rooks are indestructible. I like that kind of idea. But yeah, no, Black's next plan is to move his other rook next to the king, move it to the square behind the queen, and just continue putting pressure on the centre and say to White, you know, you're quite far back with your pawns. You're not going to advance them forward. And so it's kind of almost like baseline tennis, or in a way, both sides are kind of making their shots from the back.
Yeah, neither side can really spring forward, approach the net, because then bad things might happen. They might not be ready for it. The opponent might have a shot over them. And yeah, both sides, actually, if you notice, they're in their own territory right now. White just kind of huddling on his first 3-4 ranks, and Black doing the same. Personally, I slightly prefer Black's position actually now, that White hasn't broken forward in the centre, because Black's pawn structure, if you look on the left-hand side, the 3 pawns there, they support each other very well. They kind of clamp down on any pawn pushes from White, so which means it's actually harder for White to find a plan. As Ivanka mentioned, Black's next move is simple, it's straightforward, just bringing a rook to the centre. What's White doing in the meantime? That's why Magnus is thinking. Yeah.
And is there also a positional threat of the Black Queen and the Bishop being aligned together on the same diagonal, and the Black Bishop coming and trying to make a trade with its counterpart, just to kind of soften those light squares around the White King?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And actually, this is something that we see a lot happen, especially maybe at club level, at beginner level. These two pieces, they do line up on the same diagonal, as Jovanka mentioned. If white just takes a time out, just improves the rook, a very natural move, the bishop might spring forward. And this is one thing for all the viewers at home I recommend not to do. Never, ever take the bishop on black's terms or on your opponent's terms, because this would allow, firstly, a bad trade. White's bishop there is a key piece, but secondly, it would allow the black queen into the position. Suddenly, black has ideas, next move, of bringing the knight forward. Maybe later on, if the stars align, trying to checkmate the white king. The white king does not feel safe now because the black queen is so near. And yeah, definitely one of the concepts that Artemiev is lining up potentially. He wants to bring his bishop and trade off white's best piece. Best minor piece, at least. So if this does happen, for example, I would expect to see Magnus run away from the trade, maybe just retreat his bishop, or if he wants to allow the trade, just, for example, making a move, at least let it happen on your own terms. Let black spend the time trading off the pieces. And now the white king is pretty safe because the black queen can't enter the position. So this is actually a very, very common pattern, and just one to remember. Don't allow your opponent's queen near your king. It will end in disaster.
Absolutely. That's one of the fundamental rules that I live by. It's like, don't let your opponent's pieces into your side of the board.
Yeah.
You got to be possessive. And if they do, by chance, enter, then you're like, OK, well, I will get rid of the most aggressive one. And the black queen, she's a fantastic attacker. So, yeah, I actually fell foul of this rule in a game I had against Fabiano Caruana in a classical chess, yeah. And I let the queen, the white queen in this case, live on a square, on the h6 square. And he was saying to me after the game, why did you do that? Why did you not kick her away? And I'm like, yeah, because I was working out some forcing lines. And he goes, no, just kick the queen back and then continue the game. So a valuable lesson there.
Yeah, happens to all of us at some point.
Well, but this bishop that Magnus has, it doesn't look like a good bishop. Will he lose that bishop anyways? It looks kind of trapped, basically.
Yeah, I guess one thing Magnus is considering right now is to move away the white knight from the king side, just move it out of the way, and then white's light squared bishop has a whole diagonal to look at. It will control a lot of squares. So it might not look great right now, but firstly, it's a protective piece. It guards the white king. And secondly, it will have its eye line on a fantastic diagonal once the white knight on f3 moves out of the way, once that kingside white knight just shifts. So maybe Magnus is actually going to move that knight now. I wouldn't be surprised by that. The white knight, for example, could jump into the center of the board and actually hit the black queen, but that would result in some trades. So Magnus just deciding whether now is the moment to leap forward or whether to just, again, maintain the status quo, allow that trade to happen maybe, but on his own terms. And meanwhile, this is the Airthings Masters, and there we can see the air quality in Magnus Carlsen's home office from where he's playing, and it looks very warm in there, 26 degrees.
Just the way he likes it.
Just the way he likes it.
Yeah, but
humidity not ideal either.
The humidity is not ideal. So, but OK, when it comes to the CO2 levels, that's spot on.
Yeah, and the particle matter, no pollution in that room. Looking good in those stakes. So that's one thing we'll keep on checking out throughout this tournament, the air quality stats. I recently played some friendly games with our friend Askild, and yeah, we were testing the air quality, and it really does make a difference, actually. We'll see that maybe the longer the day goes on.
Yeah.
So, OK, meanwhile, both sides have just brought their rooks to the centre. That idea that Jovanka mentioned of bringing the bishop forward, keep that one in mind for later. OK, Magnus has jumped forward with the knight, so he's actually combined all the ideas we mentioned, and now we have seen a trade of one set of knights, and the black queen is under attack. She has to move. She has to find herself on a safe square. But guys, we have the first result of the Champions Chess Tour 2022.
Wow.
Esipenko, the young Russian player, he's won a game.
Impressive stuff. The 19-year-old in his very first game, in his very first tournament, in his very first season of the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour. A win, taking the lead already. Andrei Esipenko, and a bad start for Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. But if there's one thing we know about Mamedyarov, it is that he can make a comeback, and he can definitely win some games as well. But what a start for Esipenko.
Yeah, I just took a peek over at that game. It looks like Esipenko tricked his opponent, tricked Mamedyarov in the opening. He won a piece as early as move 11.
Wow.
And actually that game ended pretty much in checkmate, or it was about to be checkmate. And it was that exact pattern that we just pointed out, Jovanka, of one of the queens pouncing near the opponent's king and just, combining with the rest of her pieces, trapping the opponent's king. So, yeah, it's an important pattern to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Well, Esipenko, and he's going to face Magnus in round 3 today.
Yeah.
So he's on fire.
Yeah, it's an ideal start for him, to win so effortlessly. A little bit unfortunate for Mamedyarov, but like you say, his powers of recovery are quite substantial. And he's used to this kind of seesaw of results. You know, he's used to winning and then losing.
Yeah, right.
And
very few draws.
That's Mamedyarov's style.
Yeah, we love him.
So definitely. That's why he has his place in our hearts and on the tour.
Yep.
And, going back to this position, there's a big question for Artemiev to answer, which is like, where is he going to put the queen? Mm-hmm. I would be reluctant to move it in the eye line of the white rook. But then again, I kind of don't really want to advance her forward.
Yeah, so the black queen under attack from this knight. She has to move, as you mentioned, shifting her across one square. She won't feel entirely comfortable on this line. For example, white can now push forward with a pawn, maybe one of these two pawns, and try and break through towards her, towards that black queen. So I don't think we'll see her land on that square. Also, one thing to mention, this white knight combined with this white bishop, now they're the dream duo. They team up perfectly because the white knight can actually pounce and jump into the position, attacking the black rook. This would lead to some really bad consequences for black because this knight as well, protected by its bishop. We talked about that bishop being a key piece. Therefore, I think we'll see the queen find a different square. If Artemiev is feeling a bit scared, a bit passive, then he will just retreat her to a safe square, such as this one. I don't really like this, to be honest, because queens want to be on active lines, active diagonals. I think the most likely move that we will see after some thought from Artemiev is the queen to this square, a slightly more active square. She's pretty safe here for now. She looks like she might get attacked at some point, maybe by a pawn, but this wouldn't be possible at the moment because the black queen could maybe just capture on this square. She could even just retreat. And I don't think Magnus really wants to loosen up his queenside pawns yet. They will just be targets, for example, from black's bishop. So this one looks like the most active square in the position, but we'll learn a lot about what Artemiev is thinking here, depending on which square he chooses for the queen. If she steps back, he's feeling a bit scared. If he steps forward, he maybe likes his position and wants to be more ambitious. Let's go back to the players. It's a big moment, as Jovanka said, and Artemiev has spent quite a lot of time. Yeah. He needs to move that queen.
He does need to move that queen. And I just peeked at the computer's evaluations, and the computer says, basically, there are 3 queen retreats that are fine. So he can move the queen 1 square forward. He can move it. It really likes your move of moving it to 2 squares along the diagonal. Even backwards is okay. But what he must not do, absolutely must not do, is put the queen in the eye line of the rook because of the move that you highlighted. There, white would just be better. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so 4 safe squares, but 3 of them are fine. 1 of them is bad.
One of them is bad, yeah. One of them will be like drinking poison.
Yeah, that's one of the toughest things in chess when you know you have 3 or 4 options. Actually, they're forced moves, so you have only 4 moves to consider. But how do you compare them? How do you choose between the 4 viable options? Maybe 3 of them have roughly the same value. They won't alter the evaluation of the position. At some point, especially in rapid chess, especially in online chess, you just got to say, OK, this is fine, that's good enough, I'll play this move, and then I'll think later. But Artemiev, he's diving deep into the position. He spent nearly half his time on this one move, and he might kick himself later because 3 of the queen moves are fine. And I think the only move that would be a mistake here, bringing the black queen across 1 square, that's the least natural of them anyway. You don't want to put your queen opposite your opponent's rooks. OK, he needs to move. Artemiev, Magnus will be gaining in confidence the longer that he sees his opponent think. Yeah, where to move that queen? Big question.
Yeah, and I love the fact, and I love the fact that it's going to psychologically reveal the state of mind. You know, if he moves his queen all the way back, I mean, that's a clever move, but it's also like scaredy cat.
Yeah, that's the kind of move I would play, and then I'd be like, oh no, I'm scared. Just keep me safe, please. I don't want to lose my queen, blunder my queen against Magnus.
And I guess he would be kind of considering if he steps forward with the queen 1 square, then maybe, you know, he'll be, and OK, and it's happened on the board, and I was wondering whether maybe white now can strike in the centre, because, you know, this is something that Magnus will always have in the pocket. You know, the pawn will, the pawn in front of the queen will move 1 square forward at any time. So this is something that Artemiev has to calculate on every single turn. Is it possible now?
Yeah. It's definitely possible now. It's something that maybe Magnus will consider. Just to show your idea on the board, Jovanka, this black pawn is doing great. It looks like it's clamping down on the position, stopping white from advancing a pawn on either of these 2 squares. But Magnus will be trying to find the opportune moment, that small window where he can push one of these pawns forward. And you're mentioning it now, Jovanka. I think this is quite a clever move. However, there's a lot of tension on this line, and it's not clear who opening the position up will favour. So I think now taking this pawn would probably be a mistake for black, because it would allow the white knight forward, attacking this rook, attacking a pawn, and this white knight amply protected by these two pieces. This would be real trouble now for black. But black can maybe ignore this, and I mean, I'm trying to find a useful move. It's not easy at all for black. Maybe I can move this black knight out of the way. But for example, if I just play a random pawn move, white isn't yet threatening to capture this pawn because there was a pin on this line. And now after queen takes queen, the rook recaptures, black would actually win a rook in the process. So if white does do this, which I think is maybe one of the best moves, but definitely the most ambitious move, then it's maximum tension and it could go either way very quickly. I think maybe black should maybe retreat this knight just to open up this bishop. We mentioned white's strong bishop on this square. Black also has a nice bishop on a long diagonal. But either way, Magnus is definitely considering taking some action with one of these pawn pushes, most likely. If he wants to play safe, he could just retreat his knight, but stepping back, it's not his style. It's not what anyone really wants to do. So is now the moment? Will we see the world champion take a risk and maybe push this pawn forward?
Is this one of those games where you say, oh, a draw is the least likely result? Or what can you say?
Anything can happen here.
Okay.
You know,
Well,
there's
I
so
like
much
well.
tension in the position. And whilst we're waiting for a reply from Magnus, I do have to share with you a few selfies.
Oh, yay.
And we have Louise, who is watching from Ireland. And she is cheering for Alexandra Kosteniuk. And, well, we all wish Alexandra Kosteniuk the best of luck. And, oh, well, Magnus has advanced his another pawn. And now there's even more tension in the position. And, wow.
Oh, yes.
The question is thrown back to Artemiev. What's he going to do? How is he going to handle that? Because presumably it's the same idea. After pawn takes pawn, that white knight can jump into that square.
Yeah, I think that would be a huge mistake, capturing that white pawn. It's poisoned. He's actually just offering up this pawn as bait, Magnus Carlsen. It's a sacrifice, but if black accepts the sacrifice, bad things will happen. The white knight will jump forward to that magical c6 square that we highlighted a few moments ago, and black's pieces are just not ready for that to happen. So black needs to avoid touching any of his pawns right now. I think he needs to move the knight. I'm not sure which square the black knight wants to jump to, but once the black knight does move, the black dark square bishop will hit the white knight in the middle of the board and maybe cause Magnus to at least have to react, have to take a step back. And yeah, I think Magnus is playing against the clock situation from Artemiev. He's taking risks now. And yeah, as you mentioned, Kaya, all three results are possible. A draw is far, far away. I doubt that we'll see a draw in this position. But if we do, it will be after a lot of fighting. Fighting chess.
It's a critical moment, as you highlight, and I also have to show you a selfie from Monroe L. You'll appreciate this one. So he's saying he's ready, they're ready to go with their new mug, which is one of the I Found the Winning Move mugs from Askild. May the best player win.
Oh, nice.
Nice choice of mug.
Yeah.
Very nice, and well, congratulations on being one of the winners of those puzzles. Nice.
Yeah, we have lots of competitions throughout the Champions Chess Tour, right? We did last season and we will again. And yeah, we had a countdown this year of puzzles from last season. So keep an eye on our Twitter for that. Yeah, I'm a bit jealous. I wanted a face with Askild's. I wanted a mug, sorry, with Askild's face on it. But no, I didn't win, unfortunately.
Oh. Well, something else that's new on social media, David, is your new Facebook page.
Yeah, I do have a Facebook page.
Yes, it's so cool as well.
You like it?
Yeah, I love it. Because, you know, now I can, you know, I talk to you here and I want to hang out with you as much as I can. Yeah. But, you know, you're a busy man and, you know, you're a popular guy and you play tournaments and, you know, but now I can follow everything you do and, you know, who you hang out with and behind the scenes. I love it. Yeah,
I'll be dropping some serious selfies on there sometime, behind the scenes action, some news. We have a new podcast coming out as well. We'll talk about that a bit later. So yeah, go check out that Facebook page.
Definitely. And yeah, we're going to talk about that podcast as well. A new podcast is launching today, you guys, with Askild and David and a mystery guest. We will reveal later on.
And meanwhile, some action on the board. I did mention black's knight probably wanted to jump out the way, just to open up the black dark square bishop, and that did happen. Black's knight retreated. We saw white capture a knight, and now actually both the dark square bishops have been traded off. They have disappeared from the board. And this, I quite like it from Artemiev's side. He simplified the position. But then again, it feels like Magnus maybe has a small advantage just because of the fact he will have an extra central pawn a bit later on. Maybe now, for example, Magnus can initiate even more trades, take off one of the black pawns, open up a line for his rook. And yeah, it feels like black, maybe temporarily at least, on the back foot.
Yeah.
It's still roughly balanced, but what do you think, Ivanka? Whose position do you prefer?
You know, I'm going to answer your question in two parts. When it comes to the position, I think black is okay. When I look at the clock situation, I'm like, ooh, you know, Magnus has got just over 5 minutes and Artemiev has just under 3 minutes. When I look at that, I think it's in Magnus's advantage if you were to maintain the tension on the board a little bit longer. So rather than trade, I would be like, let's build a little bit.
Yeah, just make Artemiev sweat, make him work for the exchanges, for the trades, maybe.
Exactly, and make him just think about, you know, calculate the possibility of white trading that pawn on every single move. And, one thing we do know about Artemiev, though, is that having said all that about the clock situation, is that Artemiev is a fantastic calculator. He calculates so quickly, and he's in his element in simple positions. We've seen him find the most fantastic combinations with seconds to spare on the clock. But you know, people err in situations of chaos.
Yeah, and it might not look like a huge difference on the clock, but it will become a factor for sure. As I mentioned, actually, I played Artemiev a few months ago. I was playing for England. He was playing for Russia at the European Team Championship. And every move I was thinking, OK, I can't give him an endgame. I can't give him a simple position. He will trick me. He will outplay me. So I was lucky, just having watched lots of his games on the tour, that I learnt a bit about his style. But Magnus is actually going against that advice. He did trade off some pawns. He did trade off one set of rooks. Now, we mentioned White's rook has found an open line. White's rook on that C file is fantastic, but it might get traded off at some point by Black's rook. Black's rook, even now, could just sidestep one square, trade off those rooks. And suddenly, Artemiev, he's in a position where he thrives. All of the danger has gone. White doesn't have any material left to go on an attack against the Black King. No real checkmating ideas. White just pushing Harry the H-pawn there, trying to maybe push it forward even further, but Black can block the push of that pawn, Black can trade rooks. It feels like Artemiev is guiding this game towards safety.
Can he guide it longer than that to, you know, winning situations?
Yeah.
There's some danger, actually, for Magnus. You know, if things really go wrong for him, you know, take a look at the pawn structure. Now, take a look at which pawns are passed, which ones that don't have an opponent. And you look that Artemiev has a pawn majority on the left side of the board. And that means that in a king and pawn ending, he would have almost a winning advantage.
Yep. If the queens come off, actually, then I think Black is the only one who can win because of that 2 versus 1 majority over there, as you mentioned, Ivanka. So I think Magnus really needs to keep the queens on because he needs to be active. He's now pushing in the centre, but White's central pawns take an age to push forward and to break through to create a pass pawn. Black's pawns, especially if the queens come off, will just easily run down the board. They'll sprint towards the end goal. So, as Ivanka mentioned, now White doesn't really want to trade bishops. White doesn't really want to trade queens. And that means there's not actually that much margin for error. Maybe trading the queens at some point will be OK, but he needs to make sure those black pawns aren't running. And, right now, who would you prefer? I said White about 4 or 5 moves ago. I would change my mind now and say Black.
I think Black has the upper hand here, I agree with you. And Magnus actually following the rule book. The rule book says that when you have a passed pawn, you should push him.
Yep.
And he's doing that. Very elementary.
Yeah, on whichever side you have the majority, that's where you try and initiate the play. And White does have this kind of 5 versus 4 in the centre and on the right, so he's trying to push now.
But this move, actually, for me, breaks a few of the rules, you know, because, I know it's an end game and there isn't much danger to the Black King, but still, suddenly, take a look at that diagonal. The King is feeling a little bit nervous, especially because it's the Queen and Bishop that can potentially attack on the light squares, which is just weakened.
Yeah.
So...
And also, we just mentioned you should push on the side that you're stronger.
Yeah.
Black there has pushed on the side that he's weaker, where he has fewer pawns. So you're right, King safety, it might look like an endgame, but while queens remain, king safety is still paramount. It's still very important. And Magnus, what's he considering? I would be very tempted to actually push forward the white central pawn to attack the black queen. So white's pawn on the e-file, push it forward 1 square, attack that black queen. Also, white's bishop a bit blocked in by its central pawn there. So if you push that pawn, you open up the bishop's scope. It's still not much. I'm surprised to see the evaluation bar go over to white side that much. But yeah, maybe a slightly careless move by Artemiev. And wow,
my favourite pawn structure on the board.
He's not holding back.
Yeah, 3 pawns all sitting on the same row.
Wow.
Yeah, that's ambitious. I'm very surprised because I just talked about king safety and now white's king is not entirely safe anymore. No. But I like the idea behind it. White just wants to throw everything forward in the centre. And yeah, maybe again that's with one eye on Artemiev's clock. Suddenly, black is going to be on the defensive once those pawns continue rushing forward. And 1 minute left now for Artemiev.
Yeah.
I mean, he's super quick. He calculates very, very speedily. But Magnus, in these types of situations, is ruthless. So, OK, 0.0 according to the computer, but still a draw is far away. Still a lot of life left.
Yeah. That's that move, pushing that pawn 2 squares forward is kind of like a hustling move. You know, you're going to hustle mode because you start to threaten. You don't actually threaten anything, but you kind of
you hint at
ideas and you start putting those ghosts in the position. And there we see it. We see Artemiev has reacted to the threat and he's pushed his pawn in the centre. I mean, that is wow. I'm surprised by that because it's allowed Magnus the best type of pawn you can possibly get, which is a protected passed pawn.
Okay,
that pawn is going to push itself forward.
Yeah, there's 2 options though, Jovanka, because this is a pawn sacrifice from Artemiev.
Yeah, you can take it as well.
Artemiev could just, Carlsen now could just grab this black central pawn and it's protected by white's queen. White's queen on the diagonal will guard white's central pawn there. However, maybe the reason you're not so keen on that move is because white's pawns then would be isolated and doubled. And maybe having 2 doubled pawns is not necessarily better than having 1 strong passed pawn. And you're right, your instincts were correct there, Jovanka.
But it's always nice to have that like little joker card in your pocket. And that's what a protected passed pawn is. Because once again, if you fast forward to a king and pawn ending, that pawn is going to win the game.
Yeah, if the bishops and queens disappear now, then white is the one winning, right? And that was, I mean, it was pretty much the opposite just 3 or 4 moves ago. So Magnus has definitely gained something over the last few turns. And now, OK, black's pawn's done too much forward and white taking a timeout to shuffle the king to the corner to safety.
It wasn't, maybe it's also got the hidden plan, I don't know whether it's any good, to trade off bishops.
You mentioned...
make those trades and kind of just say, hey, you know, remember that pawn I got in the centre of the board? Well, I still got it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make use of it.
Yeah, so white's bishop now could actually step 1 square in front of the white king now protecting that square, and that would offer a trade of bishops. Big moment. Does Artemiev continue? I think he has to, just in practical terms. He has to continue pushing those pawns in Jovanka. Yeah, both sides now playing their main ideas. Black pushing his pawns forward on the side he's stronger, on this side of the board. White now trying to trade bishops. Once the bishops disappear, as they have done now, white's queen is going to try and snake her way in to the black position. She's going to offer a trade of queens maybe, try to start checking the black king. And yeah, that's an open line. She's about to enter the black position. And
Magnus is following the golden rule that you've told us in queen and pawn endings, which is always activate your queen, maximise her potential. OK, Artemiev given a check. He doesn't have much time on the clock. And now the white king starts finding a safe place on the second row.
Yeah, and again, the engine, the computer might say 0.0, but this is a difficult position to defend. Black is on the defensive, I'm pretty sure, and he's only got 20 seconds left, less than 20 seconds now. So, yeah, this one, we might see the evaluation really shoot up in the space of 1 or 2 moves. I think black has to activate his king now because, OK, there we go. The black king was doing nothing, not contributing. White's central pawn there, the white d5 pawn, the passed pawn, is going to start marching at some point, so the black king has to move towards it. But the computer has shot up suddenly. What could white's idea be? Feels like white has to activate the queen now. Can white jump in with the queen, start attacking some of black's pawns?
I think you can. I think you put her on the 5th row, I think, because the main thing that white has to calculate is whether the black queen can activate herself and start posing a threat to the white king. But I think it's not a problem. I'm pretty sure it's not a problem because white's queen is so powerful. I mean, if it is a problem, then you find a safe place for your king, and that's it.
Okay, so Magnus has given a check. So we were maybe advocating this move, the white queen hitting some pawns. And as you mentioned, Jovanka, potentially Magnus was scared of the black queen jumping forward this way to try and sneak in towards the king, or maybe even this way. But instead, Magnus has given a check. And now the black king has had to run away. Magnus now, what's he planning? Maybe he's going to jump into the position with his queen. Maybe the black king just not on a great square now. It's on a dark square. It might get checked. Okay, Magnus actually chooses the square we mentioned, but he's worsened the position of the black king first. So now if the black queen does jump forward, white does have a nasty, nasty check, hitting the king, and next move, gobbling up a black pawn.
And I'm taking a look at the clock situation here on my computer, and I can see seconds remaining.
Okay.
And,
I think it's a
Magnus
mistake.
blundered.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a mistake from Artemiev, because now Magnus has this check that we mentioned. He's played it. The black king has run. This is a double attack, and now Magnus... Okay, he's winning. All he needs to do, let's go back to the players. He needs to bring his queen back, swap the queens, and then this pawn will march up and win. Let's go back to the players. Is Magnus going to find the winning move? Bringing his queen back and trading off the black queen. Jovanka, does that just win on the spot?
It wins on the spot, and it's on the board.
He's found it, and look at this. It's a pawn race, but white's pawns are going to be just one move quicker. And there we go. White's going to continue pushing that pawn in the centre, I think. The queens... There's tension there, but it's as if they don't exist. So the queens have traded.
I think the black king might even get checkmated.
I hope we see checkmate on the board. Artemiev is about to allow this. 2 queens, and then Magnus will deliver checkmate. Oh, no, he's going to resign, is he, before checkmate?
No, allow us a checkmate.
Show us the checkmate, Vladislav.
Well, what a start, though, for Magnus Carlsen in the World Touch Champions Chess Tour 2022. What a win and what a game.
What a game. It really heated up at the end there.
Yeah.
I mean, we said it. The computer said 0.0, but if you have less than 1 minute left,